Wow. JC absolutely killing it with that intro, man. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Aces Up podcast, where we bring you nothing but fantasy football aces to give you valuable insights on our game to help you get prepared for all of your 2025 fantasy football drafts. I'm Joe Carlton, and tonight it is an honor to have Michael Reedy of Fantrax and Dennis Michelson of the Science of Fantasy Football as the first guest pairing of this show. We will be discussing draft strategy, specifically adaptive draft strategy, as well as diving in a little bit more on Dennis's MVP index and opportunity index on a per player basis. Before we get into our fantasy football discussion, I would like to go over the focus of this show and why I went with Aces Up podcast as the name. Every few weeks, I will be mixing in a separate show as well as the fantasy football show. This will be like a bonus episode, focusing on some poker content, specifically at least at the first few episodes. I want to highlight female poker players who deserve to be recognized. A lot of them are great humans, and they have a ton of insights and advice to give other female poker enthusiasts, as well as professional advice in general. We will get to know them a little bit on a personal level, as well as learn about their poker journey, highlighting some of their accomplishments. Really looking forward to those shows. Now, let's turn our attention back to fantasy football and on tonight's guests. Mike, Dennis, how are you gentlemen doing this evening?
Good. Honored to be here for your first episode.
Very happy to be here. And Joe, I think there is a crossover between poker and fantasy football, especially in the draft. Like draft strategy, poker strategy, there's like some overlapping things there. So I think that'll be a cool mix.
I find that Dynasty has a lot of the same qualities. Really learning your opponent. You have the same 11 opponents all the time. You learn their tendencies. You use their weaknesses and when they make their mistakes, that's when you capitalize on them. Poker, there's a lot of similarities between Dynasty, fantasy football, and poker for sure.
Yep.
All right, so Mike, how you doing?
Doing good. As if you didn't notice from some of my responses in the chat, I'm a little out of it.
Still under the weather?
I've been sick since January 13th. I'm just starting to feel better now. Yeah.
I was gonna say, you sure you don't got like walking pneumonia or something?
I don't. They think I have some form of asthma. They're trying to nail it down, but I've had bronchitis twice since.
It's awful. Yeah.
It's not been a fun 2025 so far. A lot of coughing. I'm gonna try to stay lubricated.
All right. So before we jump into draft strategy, I just want to go over the big news today from Scott Fish. Just a brief overlook of the scoring system. Did you guys catch it? You guys seen it? I know Mike.
I pulled it up on my computer. Yeah.
And so it's two separate, one for sleeper and one for MFL, but it kind of balances out. I believe it is actually. Go ahead, Mike. You want to read it up? You got it pulled up.
It says it's not set for 2025. What I'm looking at. Sorry, on the website.
All right. So I believe it is still tight end premium. It's not the full 1.5. Not a full 3 times. I think it's just 2 times premium. Every touchdown is worth 6, and for some reason, some weird odd reason, probably because Travis Hunt is coming in the league, there's defensive scoring. I mean, other than him, do you guys see any other player getting defensive points?
If there's an interception or
right,
a fumble recovery,
there could be a tackle.
Yeah. Or if one of your wide receivers is playing on special teams, will you get special teams tackles as well, or just if there's a defensive snap? That's the question that I have for the rules man at Scott Fishbowl. because that's the only way I could see anybody else getting any points out of it.
Nice. All right.
Well, they have sacks for 6 points, safeties for 6 points. I found it finally. They have a slide on player profiler. Um, Block punt, forced fumble, 3 points each. Fumble recovery -3 points from the opponent. Tackles -2 points. It's going to be complete IDP. It looks like so. It will be interesting.
All right. Let's jump. So we're going to talk draft strategy. Let's jump right into it. We'll start with the preparation. When you guys enter a fantasy football draft, what's the first thing you're doing? You're looking at before you get into the draft room. Mike,
You go first. All right, I'll go first.
All right.
So I want to know the scoring settings, right, and whatever the league is, like we were just mentioning for Scott Fishbowl. Then if I create my own rankings, but if I was just any other player out there, I would probably go find the rankings on the platform you're playing on specifically, because if you go to say Fantasy Pros or whatever, that won't be the same if you're playing on Yahoo or ESPN or Sleeper. They'll all have their own rankings, which will differ. Find the rankings on where you're playing, understand the scoring settings, and then one of the things I always talk about a lot is the opportunity, right? Meaning, is the person going to get a lot of touches this coming season? There's coaching changes, there's personnel changes. I'll use Roma Duns as an example. I was very low on him last year. I took a lot of heat from Chicago Bears fans. I rubbed it in their faces in January and February this year that he was the third option in that offense. Some people are still very mad at me. I don't care. I took a lot of heat from Bears fans last offseason. O'Dunn's was the third option. They had Keenan Allen. They had DJ Moore, two veterans who with good hands, and they had a rookie quarterback who, I mean, he needed somebody he could trust to pepper with the ball. And if Keenan Allen played, that tended to be the guy. It also, Caleb wasn't very accurate overall, right? And you had a rookie wide receiver. Now, Keenan's gone. O'Dunn's is still there. They have another offseason together. He's probably going to be a lot better this year than he was last year. So, this year the opportunities changed dramatically. And I think I'm going to bump him up my rankings quite a bit because of that, just because of the changes. You look at like Drake May with the Patriots. It'll be his first year with a new coach. Unfortunately, his second year playing, he gets another new coach. Situations change dramatically. And if you look throughout the fantasy community, it appears a lot of people are expecting Drake May to have a very good season because of that. They added Stephon Diggs, new offensive coordinator, offensive line help. You have to factor that stuff in. It's not just Saquon Barkley will be the number one running back because he was so good last year, which is what most people do. And it just doesn't work that way.
No, that's the case, and Mike is right. The first thing you need to do is you need to understand the rules in the league. If you start 3 wide receivers, it's a lot different than versus starting 2 wide receivers. If it's tight end premium, that's going to bump up a few players, not all of the tight ends, but a few players will be bumped up in that case. Is it super flex? Is it one quarterback? Mike's also right. It depends on where you play because the ADP will be very different from site to site. I like to play a lot at FPPC for my redraft. And I like to play over there because the competition is really tough. And I like to have some challenges. And I'm not afraid to play against some really good players, but I also like it because the consistency from league to league with the talent is pretty good. So there, if I diagnose the ADP, and when I say diagnose, what I'm looking at is how many running backs are going to be gone by the second round? How many are going to be gone by the third round? If I have an idea of what the usual draft looks like, now I can understand as my draft unfolds, where do I need to be? if I'm looking at the fourth quarterback and I'm happy with the fourth best quarterback, when is the fourth quarterback going off the board? And it will differ depending on the type of league you're in, even in a one quarterback leagues, 2 1 quarterback leagues, and they can be vastly different. They can be 2 rounds different in
Oh,
ADP. Understanding that and not being a slave to the ADP. I do my own rankings also, but it also makes no sense to go way too early versus ADP. I see so many people are like, well, I got so and so as my fifth running back, so I'm taking him when it's time to take the fifth running back. All right. What if I take the eighth running back and then the next round I can come back and get the guy that I got ranked fifth?
yeah.
It looks dumb when you're doing it on your draft sheet, but you get a 2-for-1 and you get 2 values for the price of 1. That's how you use ADP.
Well, and
Go ahead,
I was
Mike.
gonna say, one of the beauties with things like Dennis is talking about, on most platforms now, you can look at the draft board now, like if you were at a live draft, and you can see what other people have and what they need easily. Where,
Yeah.
when we started playing, that wasn't the case. If you were drafting online, it was hard to see what other people were doing. So that allows you to factor in things like, oh, this guy's going zero running back. Well, that's going to hurt him a lot later on in this draft because he's playing against me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow you to get that guy you thought you were going to get. Once I fill my starters, I'll get him. So you can't have him, even though you have 7 wide receivers, right? Like, I'll just remove that piece.
Especially if that guy is picking next to you and
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you do have that logic, that you can figure out, I love when when it's an online draft. I don't care if it's even a slow draft. I love getting people talking because that's again where the poker mentality in me comes in.
Yep.
Because if you get people talking,
They're
you
their
can
own
figure
worst
out
enemy. Yep.
you can figure out their tells. Like when I'm playing Texas Hold'em, I'm always the chatty Cathy, man. I'm talking on every hand. You will see some people in poker. They'll be talking, and then they get pocket aces and like, shut up. It's like,
Yeah, I like the
okay,
people. So that's one thing about when people start talking to me, I'm like, and then I'll be like, all right, I'm calling this guy, and they're like,
yep.
shit, I'm bluffing, you got me. I'm like, and then I'm like the worst. As I'm like dragging the chips towards myself, I'm like, the worst thing you could have done was started talking to me. Like,
Yeah, and in fantasy football, it's that way too. Because
yeah,
if somebody starts yakking and they're, all of a sudden you figure out, hey, this guy he's a Falcons fan. He's gonna grab Drake London. If I want Drake London, I got to go a little early because he's gonna take him. He's a, and I like to let people know I'm a Chiefs fan. I love I'm a Chiefs fan. I love the Chiefs, man. Patty Mahomes, he's the man. And then I ignore him in the draft, and everybody's like, what the hell is he doing? Or they try to take him ahead of me, and I'm like, great, I wanted Burrow anyway. And that's the fun part of that is you can play a few mind games, but getting ready for the draft, like I said, it's just ADP. I want to understand ADP. I already understand the
you know what I like to
and the
look
players.
I like to look at on the ADP is to see which guys are floating. So like the site I play on, NFFC, they'll show you the ADP and you can filter it out by contest, not just overall.
Yeah.
You can look at specific drafts and they show you the earliest that a player was picked and the latest a player was picked. So like you can tell which players
what your window probably is. Yeah.
Some like guys like Kittle, some drafts Kittle will float to in the 5th round. Joe Burrow will float. Patrick Mahomes is another one, can float to like the 8th round some drafts. And when you're playing in a 6-point passing touchdown league, like that's a player that you want to pay attention to floating like. For sure.
You want to get guys that you want to get them at the tail end of that variance. Like
Sam Laporte is another one. He floats too.
I like to rank my players in tiers more than just numbers, right? And I go by the tier,
like
by
that.
the group.
I love that.
So, I was drafting a friend's team in an auction league. It was a live auction. He moved to Florida, and I went and drafted for him. And nobody knew me. They didn't know who I was, which was perfect, right? And some of them were good, and they thought they were great. And uh, you throw a player out there, and they're all throwing all their money at it. You throw another player out there, and they're all throwing all their money at it. And I'm like, oh God, this is fun. And I didn't have any wide receivers, so I had my top tier was 5 players at the time. So I threw one out and I just let the money go all the way up and then I passed. And I threw another one out. I let the money go all the way up and I passed. And they're like, who does he want? Who does he want? And I waited till they were all broke and I got one of the guys out of the top tier that I wanted. And then I had all this money to spend on everything else I wanted. And they nobody had ever done anything like that to them, right? Like they had no idea what I was doing. And don't you have a favorite wide receiver? Yeah, the guy who scores the most points. I don't care what his name is.
Yeah, and Mike, you're exactly right. When I have a list of players, it's not so much a list of players; it's a bunch of guys that I'll take interchangeably.
Yeah.
Yep.
It doesn't matter to me whether in the first round, for instance, yeah, love to have Jamar Chase. I think the Bengals defense going to suck, and I think the Bengals going to have to score a lot of points. Love to have Jamar Chase. I'll just as soon take the Sun God, or I'll take CeeDee Lamb. If Prescott stays healthy, CeeDee Lamb's going to have a big year. I'll take Nakua. Like, I've got this group of 5 or 6 guys that I'm like, I'm okay with this guy as my top wide receiver. I'm okay with, you know, if I have Bijan and Jamar Gibbs as my top 2 running backs, I don't care which one I get because I don't even worry about bye weeks until I get later in the draft,
I
if
don't
at
either.
all. If at all. I have found some of my most successful years come where I go one really bad bye week. You're not going to
Yeah,
win every game of the season anyway. So why not have
that's right.
one really bad week
I
where
don't think one week can lose it for you either. I guess it could if it comes down to like the last week and that's the bye week. But I mean,
The
one
worst
week it, 1 week shouldn't kill your season.
no,
the worst is if you have some rule like CBS used to have rules where that's an illegal lineup. Well, look, I got like 10 guys on by the same week. I only have 2 guys I can play, and I'm not dropping any of them. I don't
no.
care. It's an illegal lineup then, and I lose. Like, sorry. Um, I I played with guys that would get mad when they switched to the platform on my league where I play, and they would say things like, "Well, that's an illegal lineup. He's not playing a defense." Look, he's got the best defense in the league. They're on bye. He doesn't want to drop anybody. He wants to leave a space open for zeros. That's okay in our league. There is no illegal lineup. What? Yeah.
But
All right.
but but you're colluding with the opponent. What do you get when someone says that?
Yeah, yeah, I'm clearly colluding. Yes, yes.
Yeah, no. So I mean that's the beauty of adaptive draft strategy too. It gives you an unpredictable element in the draft room. Your opponents can't really put a finger on your tendencies. I mean, if they do enough drafts with you, they'll catch on to what you're doing and they'll have a little bit of an idea of how you approach it. But they're never ever gonna be able to be like, he's a zero RB guy through and through. He's a 5 wide receiver guy in the first 7 rounds through. Like they'll never be able to do that. So
The the one thing people don't understand, and every draft strategy preaches it, you have to be prepared. But if you want to do adaptive draft strategy and be good at it, in all honesty, you have to know the other draft strategies, right?
you do,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's what allows you to adapt to what the hell's going on in your league. And that's why mentioned like seeing the board is such a big deal. Because if I can see what everybody else is doing, it makes it very easy for me to, you can throw something in there that throws someone or multiple people for a loop. In one of my home leagues once, uh, I was filling out my starting lineup first, and I went tight end, and it went one pick, and then it comes back to me 5 picks later, and I went, oh, the guy had us the second best tight end still on the board, tight end. And I watched my league go into a frenzy because this was like, fourth and fifth round. I got the two best tight ends in football at the time, and they went nuts. They went on the spree where everybody drafted a tight end because there won't be any tight ends left. I was like, this is better than I thought it could be. Because now the running back I passed on there that I liked just as much, he's coming right back to me. Boom.
Yep.
Because they
I
panicked.
was just gonna say, if your opponents were using the adaptive draft strategy at that point, the play is to push back tight end a little bit.
Yeah,
But,
and my drafts will look very different
Every league.
but they'll look
every
very
draft,
different from year to year based on what draft slot I start in. And like if I get the 8th or the 10th draft slot, that's going to be a different looking team than the 4th or the 5th draft slot.
I agree.
Because certain guys are going to fall to you that wouldn't fall to you in the right rounds because you were a little early or half round early or whatever.
Especially in the early rounds, right? Your
Yes.
team's going to look dramatically different. But like, I know you, Dennis. So I would assume as we get to the later rounds, you're going to have the same guys because they're available where you want them, whether you're picking fourth or eighth, right? When you
Yeah.
get into those late
Oh,
rounds. That's how my teams are usually made up too. And people are like, I have friends who play in a couple of leagues with me, and they're like, God damn it, if I don't take this guy, Reedy's going to take him in the next round. And I'm like, yes, I am. They'll text me, yes, I am. If you don't take him, I'm taking him. That's right.
Yeah, I had a guy last year that knew one of my little wrinkles to my draft strategies too well, apparently, because he was grabbing my backup running back about a round before the ADP, which was where I was going to take them. Because one of the strategies that I like to do that is not popular, and I don't understand the logic, because if I draft my own handcuff to my own stud, for instance, now I'm not going to use that handcuff unless there's an injury, right? There's no need. It's like he's not going to be valuable unless there's an injury. Well, if I draft Mike's backup, now I have to have 2 injuries come into play. His stud's got to get hurt to put my guy into play, but my guy still isn't going to be worth starting unless one of my starting running backs goes down with injury. So I like to grab the backups. Plus, how many times do we see it? Like this year, for instance, if you were to honestly look at the running back position and you would just make 2 different decisions. Is it safe or is it a split? If you just make that honest decision for each running back, there's only like 11 safe guys in the league this year that aren't rookies. Okay.
Is there that many?
Yeah.
Right, that's a
like
lot.
I'm being generous because I'm even saying Jamar Gibbs is safe, even though he's in a timeshare, because he's getting enough volume to be a top 3 running back no matter what happens.
He's better
no
when
matter
Monty plays too. He's actually
still
better when Monty's on the field than he is when he's not.
Yes.
Efficiency wise, yes, but he's still averaging 18.9 points per game with Montgomery there. And that goes up when Montgomery's not there just by volume. But like you said,
here's the thing that people don't understand is they go like, oh man, if Montgomery got traded or Montgomery got hurt, look at all the extra volume Gibbs is going to get. Maybe a few more touches, maybe a few more key touches where he's got a chance of scoring a touchdown.
The goal, he gets the goal. The
But
goal line
is going to be off the
bench,
or Reynolds is going to be in there. They will find another running back because they don't think he can withstand 350 hits a year. And
I would prefer that they keep doing that than him get hurt myself.
Correct.
Because it really sucks when you draft a guy that high and CMC last year, or
Well,
even the year before. He was great the year before, and the one time he didn't play was during the playoffs, and it cost me championships.
Mike, you'll get a kick out of this because I did some research and I was shocked at the number because here's the whole basis of science. Okay, when you take a scientific approach to any data set, including fantasy football, you have a hypothesis, but you don't know what you don't know until you do the data. And when I did the data, when I looked at touches at the running back position, I was thinking, yeah, maybe it's like 350. You know, um, Miss Kellogg, Hall of Famer, has his 370 curse, which I am a full believer in.
Me
He
too.
he hammers that thing too. I'm
I'm
like,
I'm not gonna I
It
am
helped
not
me
I'm
a
not
lot.
arguing with a Hall of Famer, okay? But here's the thing, when I did the study, the magic number for seeing a reduction in your weekly value. Now I'm using my MVP as the guide here, but MVP is a good sign of upside consistency. And that's what you want in fantasy football. You want guys who are good every single week.
Yes.
The magic number 310. Every single running back in the last 4 seasons. Now, only 4 seasons.
Oh, if they go over 310, we
Over
get
310 the year before, their MVP goes down. Now, their MVP might have been 140 and go down to 120, and they're still damn good.
I was gonna
But
say, is it enough to affect their
but
ADP? Like, does it matter?
it can, because even if you're drafting a guy, let's say you're drafting a Bijan Robinson was over 310 last year. He had MVP last year. It was 158. Insane. Like
That's high, yeah.
anything over 120 is like godlike in fantasy football. So 150, that's insane. He's going down this year. Now, if he goes down to 120, then all of a sudden he's more of a RB3 than RB1. You're drafting him, and he's going to be a bad value if he finishes anything worse than first or second. So even with that extreme, if you're still seeing a drop, it's not good. And a lot of times the drop is so big that you're going from an RB1, a starter, top 12 guy, to maybe a top 30 guy. And that's huge when it comes to your ADP. So 310 is the magic number. You're going to see some drop. And it's weird because usually when you're doing science, you're talking, man, if I got an 80% or 75% in the right direction, I'm feeling pretty good about it. Last 4 years, 100% of the data points. Now, not a lot of data points, granted, 17 data points, but 17 for 17 is pretty bad.
I was going to say,
So I'm a little
only so
scared.
many guys have that massive volume of touches. And the only one, I did a deep dive into this last offseason. That's why I was following that thread with Greg and you in it.
Yeah.
So this offseason, the only guy that seems to still be close to consistency with all the touches is Derrick Henry.
Yep.
Everybody else, like Josh Jacobs, dropped tremendously after his massive season. Nick Chubb got hurt.
Yep.
CMC got hurt. If they don't get hurt, they tail off production wise, and it's either their touches get decreased or they're just not. There's not as many yards per touch, not as many yards per carry, because I mean that's a huge volume, man, to get in that many car wrecks every single week. Like it's massive.
So now Dennis
Derrick
mentioned
Henry, even Derrick Henry saw a small drop one of the years that he was in this study.
But he's an anomaly.
The other year he was like 309 and he didn't go down.
Well, there was 1 year he broke his foot too, right?
Correct.
He missed the last 8 weeks of the season. Yeah.
Yep.
He was killing it before that, though. He was.
And a lot of times what we see, though, is we don't see two big volume seasons in a row.
Yes.
So even though the guy stayed healthy and he was still a valuable fantasy football player, he dropped from like 350 to 305 in touches. That's a huge difference when it comes to fantasy football value. And again, when you're drafting a guy in the first 6 picks of the draft, you want bulletproof. You don't want anything that can possibly go wrong. And that's the difference in my draft strategy too, is I don't care if I'm wrong about a player. It's
So
a
so
risk reward thing to me.
so so Dennis, now that you brought up Bijan in that 310 number, are you concerned about him
I'm concerned
this year?
about volume dropping.
Okay.
Now, I'm thinking he'll go from, like I said, he was 158 MVP. I have him forecasted for 140. Still lives up to the study.
I was gonna say
One,
he's still worth a pick at that
but
point.
140 is still worth the first pick in the
Yeah.
draft.
Dennis,
Okay.
you just touched on something prior to that question that you and I have had arguments with people on the internet with. In the early rounds, mitigate risk. Go for sure
Right.
thing. You shouldn't be swinging for a home run in the
Nope.
second round on a guy that you have
Agree.
no idea what he can do, because that's a losing bet.
Well,
And,
even if
and
it's a guy like one of
And
the guys
increase
last,
risk as the draft goes on,
yes.
right? Yeah.
So last year, case in point at wide receiver. Okay. Love Garrett Wilson as a player. Okay. Thought his MVP was going to skyrocket
Yeah,
last year.
I did.
Yeah,
so did I. So did
I
I.
didn't quite have him going up high enough. But you know what? At his point in the draft last year, he wasn't worth it because there were other guys that were more guaranteed to be good players other than injury. And you cannot forecast injury. But in this case, this is why I look at CMC and I'm like, what if that's a chronic injury? If I'm not drafting him in the first round,
He's not any younger as
now
well,
if
right?
he falls to the mid to late second round, then it's a little different discussion. But it always for me depends on the other players that are still around at that time. It's like I don't care about trying to, in redraft, if I get a stack, I get a stack. I'm not working to get a stack. I'm not working to avoid a stack. I'm working to get the best players on my team that I can possibly have. Now, one redraft that I did, actually a redraft of a dynasty league, I did. I went nuts. Okay. They let me have, and this is a super flex league, they let me have Goff, Gibbs, Sun God, and Laporta. And then they let me have Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Waddle. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take it. I didn't work to get those stacks, but I wasn't going to work against them. It's a dynasty league. It's a super flex. I've got, I looked at the playoff situation for both teams and I'm like, yeah, that might look good. But that's the thing is like, I don't care who the guy is. I don't care what team he's on as much. If I got him forecast to be good relative to what else is there in that round and he plays for the Cleveland Browns, shit, I'll take him. I don't care if I don't think much of the team. It's how I think of the player. Obviously, the team will determine how high I feel on that player, but I don't limit myself by having to have a guy. I hear so many people, oh man, I gotta have this guy. I gotta have this guy.
Never.
Now you've just basically said you don't want to win this year. Because if you have to have that guy, you have to draft him ahead of where he should be going. And to do that, you're limiting your potential.
Agreed. The one of the other things I see a lot of advice about, which I always disagree with, is you want good players on good teams. Look, I do not want the fifth option on the Chiefs. I'm sorry, I don't.
No.
I'll take the top option on the Browns passing game over
Yes,
the
I
fifth
agree.
option on the Chiefs. That's a bad offense. One guy has 25% of the target share, one guy gets 2 targets a week. But if you're saying if a million times about a player, you're selling yourself on that player, and don't do that, because the world isn't perfect. These things aren't going to always fall the way you'd want. That's where, a lot of analysts don't like to admit it, but there's a luck factor, right? Things have to go your way. And preparation, what's luck when preparation meets opportunity? So if you're
Love,
prepared
I
and
love that quote. Yep, that's
you're looking
100%.
at things this way, right? The fifth option, I don't care. I don't care if it's a guy that was a stud 3 years ago. If he's the fifth option in an offense, I don't want him. I
No,
usually don't even want the third option if I
yeah,
can avoid it, right? I
That's
want the top two
yeah.
guys.
I don't want the third option on most teams.
Yeah.
A wide receiver in
yeah,
best ball. In best ball, maybe on a couple of teams,
right,
but
because the spike
on
week potential. Yeah,
on
Like we
best
can
ball,
win that week. Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
on best ball, I want to have as many of the target leaders as I can do it. And it's amazing how people will let you do that because I had a best ball team last year where I had the target, I ended up with the target leader on 5 different teams, all on my same best ball team.
that's one of my go-tos, especially if I grab two top tier running backs early on.
Yep.
I'm looking for my wide receiver 2, my wide receiver 3, and my flex. I want those guys to be the number one option in their offense, or at
Yeah,
least as pass catchers.
Yeah.
I tend to have a little different way that I build most of the teams in redraft. In redraft, I don't I won't draft an ordinary wide receiver. Okay. Won't do it because I want guys that are going to be producing week in, week out. And I want guys with big upside potential. And so I'll look at guys and I'll be like, no, I don't want this guy. I don't want the second
I
option who's ordinary. I'll take a chance on a rookie. I'll take a chance on a guy switching teams with an opportunity versus a guy that's ordinary. I I can get an ordinary off the waiver wire any
yeah.
given week if I need to patch and fill. So I tend to build my teams with many more running backs than wide receiver. And last year, in a lot of my redraft leagues in FPPC, I loved seeing the guy that was going to be, all the analysts. Oh, you can blow your FAAB this week on so and so, and I'm like, don't have to. He's already on my team. It's but I draft 9 running backs in that
It,
format because
it
there's 18 position players on your roster. I got two quarterbacks. I got 2 tight ends. I got 4 wide receivers, maybe 5 if they fall right, and then everybody else is a running back. And that's kind of it's the adaptive strategy within the adaptive strategy. I call it better than zero. I don't understand why people are so confident when it comes to the running back position. Because if you look at the top 24, whether you look at points per game or total points, you look at that from one year to the next, look at the turnover every single year. You've got a huge amount of turnover. A lot of you might have 12, 15 guys that were in the top 24 that missed the top 24 the next year. The way that you prevent that is you do a more aggressive running back strategy to be honest with yourself that, hey, I don't know if Bucky Irving's better than Rashad White, but guess what? I got them both. I don't have to worry about that. And the crazy thing is when you grab a, a twosome like that, like I've got a lot, I had a
you do
lot
that a
last year,
lot. I know you
a
do.
lot
Yeah.
of Gibbs and Montgomery. And it's
That's a
like,
good one. Yep.
play them both, dude. Like if one's down in scoring, the other was up. So what you're striving to do is to not score fewer than 25 points between your 2 running backs.
That's a good benchmark. I
If
like that.
if you can get 25, I'm still in the match. And the game, so if I have to play them both and I get 26 points out of 2 guys, I don't care if it's 20 and 6. I don't care if it's 13 and 13. I got my 25. I'm happy. Am I ecstatic? No, I want 40. I want 45. I want 50.
But you didn't pay the price for two premium running backs. So the 26 is a good benchmark.
Look what happens each and every year. You see guys take over that job. Okay, so did I think that Bucky Irving was better than Rashad White? I didn't know. I really didn't know. I like
So you
Bucky
covered your
Irving.
bases. Yeah.
Love Bucky Irving though. So if I drafted Rashad White, I had Bucky Irving on every single one of those teams. If I didn't get Rashad White, guess who I also still had? Bucky Irving. I had Bucky Irving in like 80% of my teams last year, and I had Chase Brown in a ton of my leagues last year. And the thing is, it's like if I ended up with Ford, and Cleveland, if I ended up with Ford and Chubb, okay. It didn't work out for either one of them necessarily, but I had the starter, and that's the key is when you're building a roster, heck, if the guy sucks or he gets hurt, I got waiver wire. I can replace his ass. And, I'm not stuck with the guy all season long. That's what I don't think people understand is the draft is great, but it's one part of the building block.
Only one piece. Yeah.
One part of the building block. But if I build that team in such a way that I've got the backup to my own running back, now whether he gets hurt or whether he just sucks, I'm in good shape.
And I want to point out, Dennis, that it also allows you to punt a position if you have to, like tight end or quarterback. And I mean, preferably tight end. I wouldn't necessarily punt quarterback, or you do wait on quarterback and grab a couple later on. But what that does is it allows you to shore up everything else, and then you basically know what you're spending your fab on, and it's a lot easier to do it that way than to try to patch up multiple holes throughout the year.
And we're going to be wrong about at least one or two wide receivers every year. Okay.
At
There's
least
going to be one or two wide receivers that will be available on fab, on waivers, either before week 1 or after week 1. Like those first 2 weeks of running waivers, we're going to have at least two wide receivers that are going to be worth bidding big bucks on, and maybe a running back. But the key is if I only have to worry about grabbing one of those two wide receivers rather than trying to grab a running back and a wide receiver, I'm in really good shape because now I can concentrate on one position because I got 9 running backs. God, somebody's going to work out.
But you can make a nice, healthy bid and guarantee to get them. You know what I mean?
Correct.
You can.
There's always a quarterback that comes out of nowhere as well.
Yes.
Too, right? That if you passed on a backup or waited, I like to wait. I often wait on quarterback and try to load up everywhere else. It's you get a guy like Baker Mayfield. I mean, I added that guy everywhere last year because he was available. And I have to say, if I wasn't adding him, it was because I had already drafted him.
Right.
And I know I had discussions with people where I was like, how is this guy not getting drafted anywhere? Like
I had a team last year.
Early, and then I was like, oh crap, I could have waited and had Baker Mayfield this late. Like, you got to be kidding me. I didn't do that.
I was just going to say, I had a team where I had Lamar and Baker Mayfield. So it's like
he did not get drafted.
And it was a single quarterback league. I was like, damn, I guess I'm playing keep away. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't understand that because he wasn't available in the leagues where I was playing because he was my backup quarterback in a lot of leagues. Because if I grabbed, my 3 guys, if I missed on elite last year, my 3 guys, they have 2 of them were Jordan Love, Jared Goff, and Baker Mayfield. I ended up with a lot of Goff Mayfield teams.
I like that.
And it's like
I was in on those guys too.
Because
me and Mike were talking about the wait on quarterback strategy like crazy last year. We were in on the same quarterbacks.
And Daniels was a guy I was taking too. I had a lot of Daniels and Goff. because they were letting Goff go way too late. And again, this year, it's like, oh, Ben Johnson's gone. Okay.
People have this misconception that Goff is bad. They really do. People really think he's a bad quarterback.
He could be disrupted, but they're still scoring points.
Well, last year he only had 3 games outdoors.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's why I was in on him.
Yeah,
Indoors all the time. The problem was they ran in a lot of touchdowns instead of passing, but that happened.
But
right?
he was
The
valuable.
variance.
And especially he was valuable. He was as valuable as some of the guys that you had to get in the top 5 quarterbacks last year.
Well, and I mean, Baker Mayfield was a top 10 quarterback in the games he
yeah.
played the year before.
Yes.
And that's why when I would go quarterback early, because I did a lot of that last year, like taking like Burrow or, someone, if I waited, I was waiting for the guys we mentioned, Goff, Love, Baker, and when in my earlier drafts, when I went like someone early, and I was taking Burrow kind of early because nobody wanted Burrow either because they didn't know if he was going to be any good.
I was off of Burrow last year. I'm not going to lie. During the draft,
I wasn't afraid of him because I knew if I took him, I could get one of those other guys later that I liked, right? But
and that's the secret to grabbing 2 quarterbacks. And I kind of learned this the hard way of the benefit of the 2 quarterback draft. Joe, you were talking about knowing your league mates. Well, I'm in a home league against some really average players who always kick my ass because
they know you.
I'm so used to playing against better players that I fall into the trap every year, and I'm like, go late quarterback. I can get 2 quarterbacks.
There's probably a lot of guys, a lot of areas where you could have waited, right?
Well, and these people are taking quarterbacks in the 1st and 2nd rounds.
And they'll pick 3, right? They'll have 3 on their team. Yeah, I played in a league like that.
Yeah, so
and they were like, this guy sucks. And I'm like, I mean, you guys just do weird stuff, man. It's not that I'm bad.
I had to develop a new strategy. And what I called it was the Frankenstein quarterback strategy. It's like I can rebuild this guy 3 weeks at a time. Like I could just grab 2 guys that are not that great and mix and match on weeks when they've got a good matchup. And I look at this and the year I did it, I'm like, okay, I got Jordan Love cheap. I'm playing against a bunch of Bears fans, probably hate the Packers, so maybe that's why he fell. But it was also, he hadn't done anything. He's never started before. His first year, as a starter. And I had a lot of him. And his bad weeks, I had Goff or I had Kyler Murray to fill in there before Kyler got hurt. So I Frankensteined a quarterback together that ended up working pretty good. And I was like, damn, if this strategy works with guys that nobody wants, how's this going to work if I take one guy who's pretty damn good and then one guy who can fill in? And boy, oh boy, it really, it was like, there it goes. And I started using that strategy in every league. And the leagues, again, Professor Bush, my partner in crime over at Science of Fantasy Football, always preaches about use your diary, write things down that you did and that you tried and see how they worked. Did it work? Did it increase your return on investment? Or did it not work? If it didn't work, you learned something. If it worked, you learned something. And I learned that Frankensteining quarterbacks together and playing the matchups works pretty well. And then I looked at the reasons behind why it was working. Quarterbacks are missing time. Like I'm looking at this going, holy crap, some of these guys are missing a week or 2 here every year. And so now, because with so many of these early turnarounds, Sunday to Thursday, and they're playing a lollipop on that Sunday, maybe they'll let them sit out with that little ache and pain, get them healthy for Thursday, or at the end of the season, they sit them out to get them healthy for the playoffs. You're missing a couple of weeks a year, even from some of your good quarterbacks, or you're just missing volume. like they've got a lollipop and they know it, and they're running the ball 45 times today. And if you can pick up on that in the game script and make your switch at quarterback, and you have a second quarterback that's pretty darn good. See, I'm taking a lot of running backs late that nobody wants anyway. So I can afford to double up on tight end. I can afford to double up on quarterback because those running backs were probably going to still be there. And again, I've got a list of 10 of them. I'm only going to get 5 of them. I don't care which 5 I get of that 10. They are long shots, guys. They're not guys that I'm, going to bet the farm on, but they're guys that are in a good situation. This year, one of the guys that's in a good situation that I'm going to be leaving a lot of drafts is one of my last picks, Miles Sanders. He's got a back class of doing something. Now, granted, that was 5 years ago, but look what he's got to compete against, and even if he doesn't beat out Javante and doesn't beat out the rookie, they get hurt. He's the only live back on the roster. That's the kind of thing that I'll take a chance on late in a draft.
Looks like they're interested in J.K. Dobbins right now too. So
Yeah,
there
and
could
that
be
could
some
change everything.
Yeah,
Dobbins could change a lot.
I saw Dobbins visiting Denver somewhere today.
Dobbins was going to Denver for
bizarre,
dinner tonight.
Man.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm loving it because in all my best ball teams, I usually draft some best ball before I get into redraft season. I got a lot of Dobbins and a lot of Nick Chubb. I got a lot of Keenan Allen. I need some of these old guys to find a home.
Nice.
That's funny. You drafted the guys with no home yet. Yeah.
Their value right now, Mike. They're just sitting there.
I know. You can get them so late.
It's screaming at you in like the 17th round. But
I had a dynasty upstart. A dynasty upstart where the last
Amari Cooper's another one.
My last 6 picks were literally Dobbins, Chubb, Allen, Cooper. So I got 4 guys that don't have a home yet. And I'm like, all right.
But that can pay off so big. And like we were talking about.
Now is the time to draft them because if they do land somewhere nice, they're going to move up to like the 12th round, 11th round.
You mitigate risk in the early rounds. You get a little more risky in the middle, and then you swing for the fences at the end.
You embrace you embrace ambiguity later on. Andrew Cooper says it all the time.
And that's how you draft. And I see so many people doing the opposite, and it makes me giggle. Like you're swinging for the fences on guys early, and then you're picking like some safe wide receiver who gets 2-3 targets a game at the end of your draft. Like he needs everybody to get hurt to have value.
Yeah, and these people go in with the mindset of thinking, oh, I'm just going to play this guy for 1 week. But what happens if you have to rely on that guy? Things happen throughout the season and your flex spot gets banged up. You thought you were set early on. We weren't aggressive on the waiver wire, and now you're playing this guy week in and week out. So it's like
in a wide receiver, some of the problem is some of these guys that are the third bananas on a team are in that position because they're somewhat reliable, but they're also damn good blockers. Okay. So, but here's what happens. And you're like, oh yeah, they're on the field. And if the 1 or 2 guy goes down, they're going to be the option.
Maybe.
No, some rookie will come off the bench that ain't been doing shit. And all of a sudden, he's going to be the new guy that's the wonder kid leading you in targets. And your blocking guy is still getting his 2 targets a game and doing very little. He's he'll get you 3 or 4 points. Whoopee! I don't care. I can get those guys off of waivers. I don't want to take. I'm okay with rolling the dice on guys. I'll take last year I took a lot of Cedric Tillman late. I'm like, this guy sucks. But if everything else falls around him, maybe he does something. And that's the way my strategy has always been, is I'm taking guys that nobody else wants. And that's as my last, if I take a 5th wide receiver, that's the route I go. usually my 4 wide receivers are pretty damn good. But they're also, they might have some, shall we say, warts on them. One of my redraft teams that I'm just winding up taking, I went early on quarterback, so that will hurt you at wide receiver. My wide receivers, though, not too bad. AJ Brown, Rashee Rice, Jalen Waddle. Those are my 3 guys. And then, I'm going to grab a 4th and 5th. I don't know who it'll be. I don't really care. I probably will grab some Egbuke as a bench guy. Maybe he'll do something late in the season. But that's the strategy is, am I in love with Rice and Waddle? No, but they're good values. And they've got the upside potential.
Waddle's tremendous value.
Yeah, I like guys like that. One of my friends, he's actually the guy who taught me how to play fantasy football. I used to do a podcast with him. He said I have always like the most unsexy teams you've ever seen. He said I never like he's like, I'm in on it now because he knows a lot of why I pick these guys now. But he always was like, you get all these unsexy guys. I go for guys that average like 10 to 15 fantasy points a week, depending on the scoring system. I'm basing it off of just one league by saying that, right? And then if I'm going to have a boom or bust guy, I want him to be a flex. I don't want a lineup of high ceiling, low floor guys. I like high floor, high ceiling guys, or even super high floor. And even if their ceiling isn't super high, like I build teams that consistently score in the same amount weekly. That's what I try to build. And some people say, yeah, but when I get that boom week, yeah, but if you're not playing me during that boom week, I'm still winning. I'm still winning. I'm still winning. And if you crap out against me, I'll beat you. You need the boom. And you can't rely on the boom bust players. I hate those guys, by the way.
Well, a perfectly good example is like how Dennis says, if you grab yourself an elite quarterback or an elite tight end, then you know your wide receivers are going to suffer. So when it comes to the 5th and the 6th round, like in that range, and there's a guy like, say, Jameson Williams, a great boom or bust player. And then there's a guy like Cortland Sutton, number 1 target on their team, consistent, 15 points, unsexy pick, just like you were saying, an unsexy team.
And that's what
in that particular build, you have to go Sutton there over like it just makes more sense because your upside, you already took your upside with your elite quarterback or your elite tight end. So
yeah, but your fantasy IQ is way the hell up here, Joe, and most people aren't thinking that way, right? They're not.
But that's where you have to find a way to blend upside with consistency and make it pop the right way. You can't just go all upside and all consistency because if you go all consistency, then you're gonna have a lower ceiling.
Oh, you're gonna lose when the playoffs hit, no doubt.
It depends on how you measure consistency, though, because if I'm just looking at guys that hit over 10 points, that's a good way to look at consistency. I look at consistency with 3 different variables. Does the guy score 10? Does he score 20? Or does he score less than 5? So if I add all of 3 of those dynamics together, it takes away from the guy's total if he scores less than 5. Because I don't want guys that put up a donut hole or put up 2 or 3 points. I don't want them on my team. And so I penalize them with my MVP index that way. Now, here's what will end up happening, though. Saquon Barkley wasn't RB1 in MVP index. He was more like RB5. Because if you look at Saquon Barkley, he had his 3 or 4 games where it was like 35, 45 points, like huge point numbers, okay? He had a couple of other games where he had like 7, 8, 9. Bijan Robinson never missed on 10, okay? Right. He was so consistent.
Him and
Uh,
Gibbs both.
Gibbs
Oh, yeah,
never
Gibbs
missed
great
on 10. Like those are the guys I look at and I grade them. And that's why when I do my forecasts, it's not a static number, because a static number doesn't really tell you what that player is. And this is something I learned in weather forecasting. Okay. So if I'm forecasting a winter storm event for O'Hare Airport and they say, "What's it going to do, Dennis?" And I tell them 4 to 6 inches. That's what you're going to get. That doesn't give them the information that they need. Because what if I'm wrong? I've only limited myself to a 2-inch gap with a snowstorm. What if I'm wrong? If I'm wrong and it's 1.5 inches, that's a lot different than if I'm wrong and it's 7 inches. The difference of missing from the high was same, but the difference to their operation is vastly different. And in fantasy football, I know that there are some guys that are highly variable. We know that Jamar Chase, even though he's got an incredible ceiling for a whole season, if Burrow stays healthy, and if Chase stays healthy,
But if not,
and if Higgins stays healthy, and if the Bengals defense sucks, if any one of those factors don't play in 2023, he had an MVP index of 87.5. Okay. Under 100 is not elite. He finished the season 87.5 because Burrow wasn't there.
yeah.
The years that Burrow was there, 147, 141.7. That's tremendous. Anything over 140 is godlike for a season. But in 23, he was an 87.5. If I draft him as the first player in the draft this year and he posts a 87.5 for MVP, I lost money.
We're
And
going
I'm
to see a lot of that this year, I think. I think he's going to be going very, very, very early this year.
yes, but I've got him, I've got him forecasted as one of the top wide receivers. There's no doubt about it. 135. I've got him forecasted for MVP. I don't have anybody else forecasted higher.
His
But
ceiling
his
great.
range is 85 to 150.
If
Right.
there's no Joe Burrow, it's just not good.
No.
No.
Versus, look at what Brian Thomas Jr. did last year. As a rookie, playing with, I swear to God,
Mac Jones.
I swear to God, I wouldn't have been surprised if I look and they had one of the
Mac was
Jaguars
good.
cheerleaders out there as quarterback at one point. It was like hodgepodge of guys that you would never say, "Oh yeah, this is the quarterback I want for my wide receiver." And he was good. Like he
Malik
was
Neighbors.
There's another one.
Neighbors.
Yep.
Another one, yeah. So when I look at that, I go, some guys are very, very tied in to the quarterback, and other guys aren't. And that's why the ranges will be different. Now, that doesn't mean that if I got the first pick in the draft, I won't take Chase. But I'll take Chase understanding, my God, I've got a low possibility if something happens to Burrow.
There's
And
fragility.
Burrow's gotten
There's
hurt
fragility
2 out of the
there.
last 4 years. So it makes me worry about guys like that. It doesn't mean you don't take them. But, Joe, you said it perfectly. If you pick a guy like that, now it changes maybe the way I pick my next guy, because I don't want 2 of those wide variance guys on my
No.
same team, because if they both go down at the same time, I'm screwed.
I've seen people build entire teams like that.
Yeah.
And, they're super high on the week they all boomed. And then, lowest score record ever for a 1 week in the league during the season as well. And they're like, oh, but if they all do it again. Yeah, if they all do it at the same time, it's unlikely.
So when it comes to the high upside build, I think the format of the contests has to really call for it.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
you're playing a total points contest or one of those, what the high stakes events where you get
Perfect.
in the playoffs and there's a 3-week shootout, you want the guys that can 45 you.
Yes.
I want my Kamaras. I want
You
my
have to-
Saquons. I want my
You
champion.
have to have them, or you don't have a chance at winning, right?
Correct.
But if you're in a standard fantasy football league where there's 6 teams in the playoffs and you got to win 2 to win the title, then you got to be careful about how much upside, inconsistent upside, I should say, that you put on your roster. So you know what I mean?
And it is the variance thing that you don't want. You don't want guys like. Here's the other thing that I don't care about. I don't care about how many games a guy plays, as long as he plays 10 or more. Give me 10 games. Like if I can build a roster the right way, and if all of my guys play 10 full games, I'm fine. I'll weather the 6 games that they didn't play, because you're looking at a roster build all wrong when all you're looking is total points. Because if I'm looking at total points for the season, that told me who stayed healthy. It didn't tell me much else. And I don't care about plotters. In horse racing, on half-mile racetracks, you have these horses called plotters. Okay, cheap claiming race. They'd go out to the lead and they just kind of go 30 seconds per quarter, 30 seconds per quarter, 30 seconds. They had no speed. But if they got the lead, they might hold people off. And I don't want that in fantasy football. I want the guy that can have the big finish to the season, or at least give me 10 great weeks. That's all I want. I want 10 great weeks. I'm not even picky. I don't care when they come, because the odds of every one of my players having their best 10 weeks at the early or the end of the season, all at the same time on the same team, it's very rare. So I also draft guys. Like, I'm not afraid of taking rookies. I know a rookie wide receiver isn't going to lead the fantasy football in points, but he might give me a great 6 weeks at the end of the season.
Absolutely. 100%.
And that's what I look
that.
at. I don't want to load my team up with all rookies.
No.
But I like to have a rookie wide receiver.
You want to forecast that situation where the rookie is going to excel towards the end of the year.
Egbuke is a guy.
Trevion Henderson comes to mind with that.
Yeah. And Egbuke for wide receivers this year, because you've got both Evans and Godwin, who are old, and have had injury issues in the past. I don't care if I get anything out of him in the first 8 weeks. I want to have, if something happens to either Godwin or Evans, I'm in good shape down the stretch, because last year Godwin opened the season with an MVP of 143. Okay, he was cooking. When he went out, Mike Evans' MVP was 143.
Jalen McMillan went up too.
Before Godwin went out, Evans' MVP was only in the mid 70s.
But that's trusting the system and the quarterback, right? Like,
I want the lead wide receiver. I want to have the shot at the lead wide receiver. So if Egbuke falls to the right spot in the draft, what if he's the best that they've got in the last 6 weeks of the season?
He very well could be, right, with that team. It's very possible. I like him a lot this year.
This is why you can't be completely fading Jalen McMillan either. I feel like he's going in drafts, you got to mix him in. Yeah.
I might not have as much of him in redraft as best ball.
But you got to mix it. You still have to mix him in, for the reasons you stated.
Yeah. In best ball, I'll have a lot of him, because in best ball, I'm more of an even roster guy. I'll have 7 wide receivers, 7 running backs, or sometimes only 6 running backs. I kind of go the opposite way sometimes at best ball, where I've got more wide receivers.
And
Well, you
4
got
years
more. You
ago,
got way more. You have way more options in builds in best ball.
Yes, yes.
4 years ago, you never would have been saying this about a Baker Mayfield team,
No,
right? Like,
no.
you know,
And
but
he could crash and burn this year. Like,
he
he could
could. I
return to
don't
the
think
old
he will.
Baker.
I think he's found a home where he fits what they do.
My
Well,
But my biggest concern for him, Mike, that Tampa Bay defense had a lot of injuries last year before the year.
they
They
might not need to pass as much. You're
they
correct.
might not need to score as much. And that is a very hard thing to predict, because at this time last year, the Buccaneers defense looked pretty damn good on paper. But by the time we got to August, we're dropping guys like flies. And
There's
But
always
all of
a
a
few.
sudden,
There's always a few teams that end up like that with the
yeah.
stout defense. Detroit was another one.
Well,
It,
most people thought the Bengals defense was going to be better than they ended up last year.
could
And
throw
this year,
could throw the Patriots in there too. Although you could probably blame the coaching on that one. But the Patriots had a good looking defense going in last year too. So
and the Eagles didn't look as great at this time last year. They were like, well, I think they're going to be better is the way, but did you expect them to be the best? I didn't. Not at this time last year. By the
when
time
you
we
got
got the first few
when
weeks, yeah.
when you got Saquon controlling the clock for you, it really helps you out. Helps out the defense. You know what I mean? So you gotta assess the whole team situation too as well.
Good call.
So I wanted to touch on positional advantage with you guys. I feel like this doesn't get discussed enough. I know it can work, and I know there's times when it doesn't work. So you guys just want to give some general thoughts on it, and when you might apply it in the draft. We'll go with Dennis.
Okay.
I
I was
knew he wanted to go first.
I was going to yield right away to the handsome guy. Yeah, positional advantage. I sort of stumble into it. Okay.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I
It
like that.
depends. Yeah, it kind of depends. And this is the joy of the better than zero strategy or Mike's adaptive strategy. Because if you were to read both of our articles, you'd be like, my God, this is like Newton and that other guy inventing calculus, where there's a lot of similarities to how we attack a draft that's very different from how everybody else attacks a draft. And you're right. People go into it, man, I want a hero RB. I want a hero RB. I want 0 RB. Oh, I'm going to stick with that 0 RB. I'm not drafting a running back till the 6th round. I don't care who's there. And my attitude is, I have no idea which direction I'm going. The only time I know which direction I'm going is when I have the first pick in the draft. Then I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing this year. There were a couple of times where in redraft, I was getting the first pick more often than random. I had it like out of 12 leagues, I had 3 first round picks. Well, the first one was easy. I'm taking CMC. It's anything else is draft malpractice. The second time I got the first pick, I was like,
oh no,
do I want to put everything into CMCs? He's getting older. I don't know. No, I'm not. I'm going to take, who am I going to take? I'm going to take CeeDee Lamb. Oh, that worked out great, when Dak goes down. But so you could sometimes screw yourself by doing that. But I don't like to put too many eggs into the same basket early rounds, unless it just happens to fall that way. Like if I'm the 7th or 8th pick in redraft and the sun god drops to me every time, I will take him every single damn time. And that's kind of how I feel if I'm drafting this year, anywhere I'm drafting, and Bijan or Gibbs are available. I'm going to have a hard time passing on either of those guys
in the
because
first round.
the advantage it gives you. And again, 11 safe running back positions, 30 safe wide receiver positions. That doesn't mean that you got 30 great wide receivers. It just means you got 30 predictable guys.
I'm guilty of leaving drafts, uh, say going 6 rounds and having 4 wide receivers and 2 running backs, or 3 and 3, or even 2 really good wide receivers and then 4 running backs, and literally kicking to the curb tight end because somebody picked the top 3 or 4,
Yep.
and the top like 3 or 4 quarterbacks were picked. So I'm like, I'm gonna stack these positions so my core starters and my flex positions are solid, and now I'll come back with like a quarterback. If I punt tight end, I really punt it usually like way down the line, and just come back later with some guy who has, or sometimes if I punt tight end, what I've done a lot of recently is punt tight end and pick 2 or 3 guys, depending on how deep the bench is at the end, with top 10 upside.
Yeah.
Because,
I like that.
why not?
Guys that have a path to becoming the second target on their team. Some
Yeah.
sort of a path. They might not necessarily be because if they were the second target on their team, they wouldn't be going that late in the draft. But a path, a scenario where it can happen.
If
Yeah,
you're if you're
I had
really stacked up at the other positions like like we were saying, running back and wide receiver for your flexes and your starting positions, if you can get a tight end off and that is giving you 7 to 10 points a game, you're probably doing okay. It's. I mean, let's face it. If it wasn't Bowers last year, no one was really consistent.
McBride was the only other one.
He wasn't completely consistent. I had him. He wasn't as consistent as he was the year before. I like McBride a lot, though, by the way.
He
But
tore it up that like in the second half of the year. He was
yeah,
pretty.
yeah. And oh, what's his name there on the Niners?
Kittle.
Kittle was great at the second half of the year as well, right?
Yep.
But
he almost always is. He almost always is.
But if you missed on, say, those 3 guys, which were 3 of like the top 5 guys drafted, I just punted the position completely and came back later on.
So I have a little different way that I build a team, in that I look at different opportunities at quarterback and tight end. Okay. So running back and wide receiver, I'm just taking best player available. And if I end up with, let's say all my quarterbacks and all my early tight ends all are gone where I think they should go, where I think they would be a valuable pick, and I end up going all running backs and wide receivers through 6 rounds, I might have 4 wide receivers, 2 running backs, 4 running backs, who knows? I might have 1 in 5. I had one draft last year where I opened with 4 running backs in a row, and I didn't care. I
did
had
that.
my guys. I had Godwin. I had Rice. I had Thomas, that I knew were going to be more valuable than a lot of people thought. So I knew I had my sleeper picks at wide receiver and running back that were going to pay off, and I was going to get them. I knew it. So I had my guys early, and I didn't care, and I have my quarterback windows. So this year, Josh Allen's not in my quarterback windows. I think he's going too early. I think he will go too early. Now, if I go around past his expected ADP, if all of a sudden, let's say last year I had one draft where I ended up with Lamar Jackson in like the 4th round. And I'm like, hello, is this thing on? Nobody's picked this guy yet. How can they? Okay, I'll take him, and that's how I look at the quarterback position. Is I have my guys, and then if they're gone before I pick them, more power to you. Go for it. I usually, after the first 3 quarterbacks are gone, then I start getting a little more eager at looking. Okay, because by that time, depending on where you are in the draft, I don't want any worse than the 6th quarterback this year again. That was my magic number last year and my magic number this year. And then I was coming back. If I got the sixth guy off the board, then I was coming back with a quarterback pretty quick. I had a lot of leagues last year where I was taking quarterbacks in the 6th and 7th round or the 7th and 8th round because I was like, okay, I didn't get the guy I wanted, but I'll get the next guy too. And one of these two will end up being good. At tight end, I think Bowers is going too early, especially FPPC. It's tight end premium, but he's been gone by the 5th pick in the draft. There's other guys I like better than that. I'm not saying Bowers is going to be a bust, but you've changed quarterbacks, you've changed coach, you've added Giante, you've added Besh, you've added Thornton. Like, how many other guys do you need to add? Plus, changing coaches.
Now,
They still have Jacoby Myers too. They still have Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers is still alive. You know, he's not going anywhere. But I'm just saying, look at all the guys that they added. And then the defense is going to be better this year. They're going to have a better coach team, and they will be better. So they won't have to. They won't be passing the ball 50 times a game. Now, that doesn't mean that Bowers will be a bust. Bowers will still be one of the top 3 tight ends. But taking him 5th in the 1st round, man, that's too rich for my blood. McBride is the first guy I'd be targeting. Late, the end of the 1st, but through the first half of the 2nd. And that doesn't mean that that's the window where, if he's there, I'm taking him no matter what. I'm taking him if other guys are gone. If I got guys that are not my safe 1st and 2nd round picks, tight end or quarterback will then be my default pick. But by doing that, you have windows of opportunity for quarterbacks. And is Mahomes in that window? Yeah, but not at his current ADP. I want him about 8 picks later. Okay. Same, but with Josh Allen, I think he's going way too early. Hurts is going way too early because their defenses are going to be good again this year.
I actually think Hurts is of the elite quarterbacks. Hurts might be the best value this year.
I do, but I don't think he is the best value. Yeah, that's the problem. Is I think he's going a little early, and I was hoping that this tush push ban would go, and then all of a sudden people are like, I don't want him till the 4th round. Yeah,
he is going, and he's going in around the 4th. I've seen him go in the 5th round in some drafts.
In FPPC, he's going a lot earlier than that, and I just don't understand.
Yeah, because the running quarterbacks have more value because the passing touchdown's only 4 points. Yeah. I draft the NFFC where the passing touchdown gets 6. So in some drafts, Burrow's going ahead of her. Just for that reason.
That is the thing. But I'll take – so there'll be tight ends that'll come up. And what I'll do is I'll highlight them on my ADP chart. I'm like, okay, if I want this guy, this is where I got to take him. But if I take him, I'm missing on a running back and wide receiver. I'm okay about that. And that's how I build my team a little bit different. So my first FPPC redraft team of the year, I got Burrow. Burrow fell nicely to me. So I grabbed Burrow. Missed on every tight end. Every tight end I was like, pick away, and they were all going. And so I ended up with Colston Loveland and Brent Strange. 2 guys that I'm not sure about either one of them, but I'm kind of confident one of them will be okay. And I got them late enough where there weren't any running backs or wide receivers in that group that I liked. And that's how I usually take it. I did get Goff as my 2nd quarterback because I want some Burrow insurance. Again, you can't predict injuries, but if a guy's had injuries,
you have to account for it.
You gotta be at least, you gotta be cognizant of that. And again, when Goff came up that, okay, this is his window of opportunity. There was nothing. There were no starting running backs left that I had confidence in. There were no wide receivers that I really felt strong about, and I already had 4 of them. So it was like, all right, time for a 2nd quarterback, and then same thing with Strange a round later, time for a second tight end. And I'm comfortable with that strategy. If general speaking, the earlier I go for my first quarterback and my first tight end, the later I go for the backup. The later I go for a quarterback and tight end, the quicker I'll double up. Um, Again, I don't hold myself to that as gospel, just as guidance. The draft decides how I will pick.
You let the draft come to you. That's
Yeah.
I say that all the time too.
And,
That's what
and again, with this redraft team, I ended up with Ray Davis, ended up with Zach Charbonnet. Okay. If anything, well, Charbonnet was splitting touches anyway last year. If anything happens to James Cook, including holding out or getting traded, now all of a sudden Ray Davis is a thing. It doesn't mean that he's going to be 100% of what James Cook was last year. But if I get 70%, I got a decent running back. And again,
attached to a good offense.
those are my fourth and fifth running backs. And, I know I'm going to add some more, but I like the fact, so my top three guys ended up being Jamar Gibbs, who I opened the draft with at the fifth draft spot. And I got him. He was there. And I was like, all right, that's an automatic pick. I don't even have to think about this one. And I was hoping that Sun God would fall to me in the second, and I was going to take him, or I was going to take Puka. That didn't work out. So I got AJ Brown. He was a consolation prize. Is he as good as those guys? No, but he was better than the running backs on the board, and I knew I could get Chase Brown in the third round. And so I just let Chase Brown fall, got him in the third, ended up with AJ Brown, Chase Brown, and Gibbs as my first three players. I felt pretty good about that start.
I like that. That's kind of you. So I just want to chime in my thoughts on positional advantage. Where a lot of it is when the value presents itself. Like you're saying, you're going to get Chase Brown in round 3. He's kind of like after Chase Brown is kind of a teardrop.
Yeah.
So if you can pair him with another elite running back that you already grabbed, I feel like that's an instance when it's worth grabbing that positional advantage. Now you got 2 potential top 10 running backs, and it allows you to kind of focus on what the rest of your build, and not so much have to worry about that position. So that's what I like about positional advantage when it presents itself. I will also say this, like the format matters. So we'll take Scott Fishbowl, for instance. This year, there's an ultra flex. So you can basically start 2 quarterbacks, and there's 9 flex spots. Last year there was 6 flex spots, and there was you had to have a tight end, a running back, and a wide receiver. So last year my strategy was to make sure I grab an elite person at each of those 1 spots.
Yes.
So that I have an elite guy there, and then I was bullying a position. I called it X position because I didn't know what position it was going to be. I was talking about it with Rick Avery, guy who drafted next to me in both Scott Fish. He's like, what is X position? He's like, why won't you reveal what position you're going after? I'm like,
algebra.
I don't know. It's going to be whatever the draft gives me. And for me, it ended up being running backs, which in Scott Fishbowl works out because the scoring system favored the running back over wide receiver. So that's how I ended up with a pretty good team despite punting quarterback and kind of piecing that part of my build together. But so when you have 9 flex spots, I think bullying a position could be an advantage. Like, no, you don't want to go out of your way to bully a position, but I feel like if you grab, say, 5 out of 9 running backs that are in an upper tier, or they're getting volume. They're a big part of their offense. They're consistent running backs. So now you're taking away from the rest of the league at that spot, and now you have the flexibility. This is why it's called a flex, 9 flex spots. You have the flexibility to only have 2 good wide receivers. If you only draft 2 really good wide receivers, but you killed it at one position, even if it's tight end, if you scoop up 4 really good tight ends, say you somehow end up with 2 elites, like say you grab a McBride and Kittle, you're picking at the back end, you end up with McBride and Kittle, and then you get like an Evan Ingram a couple rounds later. That's a great positional advantage for you in the Scott Fish Bowl format. You got 3 phenomenal, 3 of the top tier tight ends. You got a high volume tight end that's going to be used in his offense, and you got 2 elite tight ends. And so it just gives you flexibility. You don't have to, force 3 wide receivers or whatnot. So format matters to me when it comes to positional advantage as well. I mean, when you have to start 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and 1 tight end, you can't let the tiers fall too far before you secure those spots. So it becomes less important in those terms. But when I feel like it's a value thing, when the draft presents it, that's when you take advantage of it.
Yeah, and this year I think it's going to be even more important to do things like that because, again, 11 running backs in safe positions that are not rookies. That's scary. That's like really skinny. So if all of a sudden, even I'm not talking, those are not the 11 best running backs in the league.
Say you're in a 12-team league, Dennis, right?
Yeah.
And you don't get one of those 11, right? So you're going
to. If I can get 2 of them, yeah.
If you can get 2, great. But what if you don't get any, right?
Correct.
So then you're going to take the positional advantage that Joe's talking about and probably pivot to wide receiver.
Yeah, and that's
or tight end, right?
And in this
what your opponent is doing your opponents next to you are doing can dictate it too. If they're hammering one position, then eventually you're going to have to pivot.
Yeah.
You're going to have to pivot because you don't want to be taking the last guy of a tier all the time or the first guy of the next tier, especially when it's a big drop off and there's other players in a higher tier at other positions. Even though you already have that position secure, if you can start more than one, or if they can end up being flex worthy, then you have to pivot and you have to go for that position.
I was saying how I can leave a draft the first 6 rounds with 4 wide receivers and 2 running backs, or 4 running backs, 5 running backs, and 1 wide receiver, depending on what's going on in the draft. So I pay attention to a lot of things like Dennis does there's 11 running backs that are really safe. And, what that means is you really do want to leave with 2 of those if you can.
And here's the thing. We know because you can start 2 quarterbacks that some people will force the quarterback issue early. There's 21 safe quarterbacks this year that are non-rookies.
I did a thing 2 seasons ago, Dennis. I'm going to do it again this off season where I did the drop off where the cliff was points scored on the season before for each position. And, everybody was going 0 running back at the time. And this is why I did it. And I was like, but the drop off at running back is so significant versus the drop off at wide receiver. Like one falls off a cliff, the other one stays at this steady pace. And I'm sure it's probably going to be similar now. Like you have to secure that running back that before the drop. And, because if you don't, then you're screwed because the guy getting the wide receivers and the theory with the 0 running back is, but I'll have all these wide receivers and they never get hurt. And the running backs always get hurt. And you just add them off waivers. And I'm like, in any league I play in that's competitive, you're not going to get those.
The second
just because you
Yeah.
want them. Nobody's
The
going to let you do that.
The second a running back that's on the waivers has any sniff of getting snaps, they're gone. Somebody's putting in for yeah.
And people don't care if you're the guy who needs him. Actually,
Yeah.
that makes them want to take him even more, so that your team's crippled. So understanding that drop off, and you at quarterback and at tight end. I was going tight end early that season as well, because the drop off was something fierce. Right, there was like four guys, and then it just fell to nothing. And it was like, if you don't get one of them, punt it all the way down to the 15th guy, because there's almost no difference between him and the fifth guy. But it's big, and I actually started going quarterback early because of that, and then I reverted back to quarterback late last season. But that's because that's leveled off a bit too, right? Like, quite a bit in comparison. But that running back position is so important right now.
Running back takes a dive, and then but if you've got a lot of bullets to fire, one of them's going to hit at that position. But you're right. You don't want both your starting running backs to be from the 25th and 26th best, just because they're alive and starting.
We call that a true hero build, and those are the ones where you're like, maybe I should have gotten a running back at some point.
Here's the thing: is like the last couple years, you got away with it because Chase Brown was cheap. Okay, he was going dirt cheap.
If you got him,
Bucky Irving was going pretty damn cheap. So those two guys ended up being really, really solid starters all season long, right? Now you compare that to this year, I'm not so sure that other than the rookies, there are going to be any of those huge surprise guys, because there's so damn many rookies this year.
Yeah.
Last year there weren't.
Chuba,
It was Bucky, and that was it.
Chuba was another one.
Chuba was coming out of nowhere. Yeah. And that's the crazy thing, is like in dynasty leagues, I scoop up all of those third on the depth chart running backs that I can. So I end up with like guys like Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard on my roster. And it's like, I ain't cutting them. They're still alive. And then all of a sudden they're like in a starting position. You're like, wait a minute. I didn't even remember having that guy, but I knew I didn't cut him. I haven't played him all year, but now he's on the team. That's the thing that, that I try to bring some of that into redraft by just having 9 of them. Like, I will have a lot of bullets that I get to shoot this year. And, I'll have some teams where I'll have Miles Sanders and I'll have Blue, with Dallas, and it'll be like, all right, I know one of these guys is going to be a scrub. Maybe both of them will be a scrub. But guess what? I can get rid of them. I can try somebody else if I need to. But if one of those guys emerges, and let's say one of those guys emerges and he's like 18th to 24th best in the league, you just got him for free. You got a starting level running back for free. And I don't care what format you're in, that's going to pay off. But in Fishbowl, when he's getting volume, you're getting 30 touches a game. That's really going to be paying off in Fishbowl. So I probably will go more running back heavy, depending on what goes in front of me in that first round. But 21 solid quarterbacks, non-rookie quarterbacks this year, 21 guys that ain't losing their job unless they get hurt. I don't know if we've had that number over 20 in recent years at this time.
Not only that, but there's really not. I mean, there is a gap, but it's not as big as you think from the top one to that number 21.
There's a big gap between, say, like 1 and 7.
7, yeah.
Okay, from 7 to 21.
It's all.
I'm not unhappy with that.
Right. Right. This is why I'm in on guys like Matt Stafford this year. Dennis, you're on mute.
Here, that's better.
Yeah, because his situation improved. He just got Devontae Adams, and I believe there's a world where Devontae Adams could outproduce Puka Nacua. So, like, if that's the case, then you have to be in on Matt Stafford. It's just where he's going like right around QB 21. I would think. I don't know off the top of my mind, but it's got to be somewhere in that
round flyer, right? Like a really good late round flyer.
He could be Baker Mayfield this year. He could,
Yeah, I've got Adams ranked as his high side.
Biggie's in the house. What's up, Biggie?
Yeah, I've got him as a high side of being like RB 15-ish. So, and the thing is like if I'm wrong on that, it's because he flipped and Puka's 15th and he's 8th, that kind of thing. So I agree with you. Stafford's a guy that I would not hesitate to take as my second or third quarterback in a super flex or a second quarterback in a one quarterback league. He could have the Baker Mayfield like season this year where all of a sudden he's like goes on a streak of a bunch of good weeks, especially if that Rams defense isn't as good.
He could approach 40 touchdowns. I really did. Like, I think Matt Stafford is elite as far as an NFL quarterback goes. Bottom tier elite, but he's
not done.
They almost beat the Eagles last year. Like, if they beat the Eagles last year, there's a chance that they could have won the Super Bowl.
There was a chance that the Chiefs would have been winning the Super Bowl.
They knew that was coming. There was zero chance the Chiefs will win it last year. How do you like that? No. So, all right. So I want to save a little bit of time for our veteran rookie talk. I want to talk about Jaylen Warren and Caleb Johnson, that situation there. I'm going to give my opinion real quick. This is not a necessarily pushing the case for Jaylen Warren, but more of a temper the expectations for Caleb Johnson. So the way I see this playing out is as long as Jaylen Warren is healthy, of course, Caleb Johnson has huge contingent upside because of Jaylen Warren's injury history. But if Jaylen Warren is the games where he's healthy, so here's the thing. I expect Pittsburgh to not be competitive this year. We don't know who their quarterback is. We know that their head coach, or their offensive coordinator, I should say, Arthur Smith, loves to run the football, and he loves to use multiple running backs, not just one. We learned that with Bijan's rookie year. And Jaylen Warren is the third down pass catching back, at least to start the season. I have to see Caleb get worked in there. They might actually mix both, but I see Jaylen Warren being the beneficiary of the Steelers falling behind in games, and I think that's where Caleb Johnson can get hurt. Everybody thinks that he's going to get his 250 to 300 carries. He's set up. We know what Jaylen Warren is. They're not going to use him. But I disregard those opinions because Jaylen Warren hasn't played a complete season. He's missed time all the time in all the seasons he's played. If they both stay healthy, and I kind of anticipate that being the case this year. I don't know why. That's just a gut feeling. But I would be careful about relying on Caleb Johnson as a RB2. I have him as an RB3 on one draft that I've done so far on NFFC, and I made sure that I got Jaylen Warren like 3 rounds later. I think I picked him up. And, Dennis, I credit you because we talked about this the last time when we were on Thursday check down, and you said that you were going to change my view on same handcuffs. I'm not saying I don't ever do that, like there's certain situations that call for it, and I feel like there's certain situations where I'm not taking Tyler Algier this year if I have
No,
Bijan. I don't see the reason to. But like this
yeah.
situation, this particular situation here, Caleb has upside. Caleb Johnson has upside, but like just be careful. Don't rely on him as your RB2. Try to get him as an RB3. If you get him as an RB2, make sure you grab a decent RB3. Don't wait until it's too late and you're taking like those not bottom tier, but secondary tier guys as an
Fantasy Pros has his ADP at 27 for a running back
Yeah.
27, which really pushes him more into running back 3 territory, which is where he should be, I think.
Right. Some people are getting a little over enthusiastic about it, though.
Dynasty, unfortunately, has been dominating the fantasy industry and making a lot of analysts think that rookies are better than they're going to be.
Right.
Uh, and it's a little too bad in a way. I'm not a talent wins out guy. I know it might 3 years from now, but I don't care about that this season, right? So I would keep him as a running back 3.
Yeah.
Myself, that's where I think I think his ADP is right. Like I
Well,
think it's
well, well. Where people can get in trouble here is with their hero running back build. If they grab a Bijan or a Gibbs, they're like,
and wait,
"Yeah, Caleb Johnson is that perfect running back too." Just be careful
maybe.
there.
So
As
so
a-
here's how I look at Caleb Johnson. It's excellent opportunity index. Okay, when I look at guys, um, MVP index less than 100 the year before, high percentage of those guys lose their jobs. Okay, um, so I build that opportunity index versus that. So 100 would be the max you could have for opportunity index. Gianti is the only one with 100. Uh, Harvey is at 87, pending what happens to Dobbins. If Dobbins signs, then his opportunity index goes down. Doesn't mean I don't still like him, just means his opportunity index goes down. Johnson's at a 63. Anything over 60 is really getting to the point where I'm like, I really like this guy. But then what I do next is I don't look so much at, is he going RB 27? Is he going RB 30? Or is he going RB 24? I look at where he's going and who's around him at that point. So I got Johnson about pick 65 FPPC right now. I can also get James Conner, who I like a lot better,
Yeah. See.
Yeah,
Exactly.
around the same time. I can get Cortland Sutton, unsexy player,
Love
but
that
a
pick.
guy who's going to be a solid wide receiver for you. I can get Montgomery, who, if I've already got Gibbs, I'm liking him even more, but still, even on his own, that's not bad. I can get Hawkinson or Kelsey at tight end at that pick. Those are all guys whose value I look at and I say, kind of like that a little better than Caleb Johnson because I don't have a lot of faith in the Steelers offense.
Correct.
Now, I like your strategy. If I take Caleb Johnson, I'm probably taking Warren.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I want to have that backup. But I might be in avoidance mode for both of them this year. I might be in avoidance mode for the Steelers because I just worry about, are they just going to ride the defense? Are they not going to be very effective on offense? Are they just going to play ugly football? I don't know what I don't know about them right now. And so I'm sort of in Steeler avoidance mode right now until I see more of what they really plan to do.
I think we
The
can.
running backs are the only ones that I'm even considering. So I agree with you in that standpoint. I will piggyback off what you're saying. The guys going around.
James
Take a
Conner so
take
underrated.
take a look at some of the running backs not necessarily in that range, but maybe going like a round or two later. I bet
Yeah.
there's some pretty good ones there too. Like
Well,
the one coming to mind is DeAndre Swift.
yeah, and
I,
Aaron
I feel
Jones.
I I feel
Jones
like
is there too.
yeah, Aaron Jones, yeah. There's
Yeah.
plenty that like, and this is why I'm saying, to you're saying to avoid altogether, but be
And I,
careful about how you draft Caleb Johnson.
yeah, and I can get
Yeah,
Waddle. I can get Waddle at wide receiver at about that same point, a little bit after. So I look at all those guys and I'm like, I like them a
yeah.
little better than Caleb Johnson because I've and again, if I don't have a running back yet, maybe I'm looking there and going, all right, at least he's going to get some carries. But I probably already have a running back
Or
by the
two
time I get to
or
pick
three.
65. Yeah, or two or three or yeah. So that's the case too. But I look at who's around them, and then again I look at it and I say, okay, now if I do take Caleb Johnson, I want Warren. Where Warren is going, I could take a chance on Brian Robinson. I could take a chance on Jacoby Myers. I could take a chance on Charbonnet. I got, Matthew Golden at wide receiver, who I like more than the consensus does. And I look at that and I'm like, damn, if I take Johnson, there's guys I passed on that I like. And then if I take Johnson, I almost have to take Warren. There's more guys I'm going to have to pass on. That's a double whammy that I'll probably avoid.
All right, Mike, you want to tell us about your veteran rookie that you picked out to talk about?
All right, let me get his first name right. Taroa McMillan is the rookie.
All that matters is you can't say Tet.
I did not say Tet.
But you can say T. McMillan and be legal.
All
Right?
right. So McMillan is the rookie. I mean, he's big. Uh, he's big. He's got long arms. He's got big hands. Bryce Young lobbied to get him drafted, right? With the coaching staff and the GM, he wanted him. I I think that alone speaks volumes. I don't think that Xavier Leggett really panned out as much as people hoped last year. I know he's still a young guy. He's still there. Adam Thielen gets hurt a lot. So those are the two veterans. This guy's going with the overall ADP is 61 as the wide receiver 27. So he's going as a wide receiver 3. I think that's fair for a rookie who's you're probably expecting to be the top wide receiver on his team, right? So I'm a Thielen guy usually, but I can't see him playing even 10 games like he did last year. Uh, he had 48 receptions. His completion rate was really good. It was 77%. He had 615 yards and 5 TDs. And then you had Leggett with 84 targets, 49 receptions, and a completion percentage, 58% of his targets he caught, right? So I think the opportunity's there. I think Bryce Young is playing really well from what we saw last year. Um, I actually think this kid is probably going to produce. So if you can get him at or after his ADP, I think that's not bad. I don't think that's bad. He's probably going to be the number one wide receiver for Carolina.
So
And
he's showing up even quicker in FPPC right now. He's going at pick 51. He's still a pick that I'll make there. I think he's this year's Brian Thomas Jr. I really
I,
do.
I like him too. And I like that Bryce Young really wanted him,
Oh
right? Like I
yeah.
just think that's a great sign. And the
And I
kid
don't
was
think
amazing in college. So
yeah.
it's
And here's the thing is Leggett is not a bad wide receiver, but he's just not an alpha wide receiver target hog type of guy. He's more of like the spread the field out a little bit. And then you got Thielen, who's your possession guy. That's a
yeah.
great combination because you can't double up on McMillan and try to take him out of the game if he's hot. He's going to be he was one of my guys I was taking as early as the third pick in rookie drafts in the first round this year. Love McMillan. I think you got a good one there.
I agree 100%. He's definitely easily going to be Bryce Young's favorite target. He was actually he's actually just because Travis Hunter is going to be playing both sides of the ball. Tet was Tetora, whatever his name is. T. McMillan. We'll go with T. McMillan. Was my favorite wide receiver of this rookie class. I was in on him. I was actually more in on him throughout the college football season, and then once we started studying rookies, I started paying attention to all the other guys that are going on. I don't watch too much college football, but like as a Drake May New England Patriots guy, I was like, man, he would be awesome addition for the Patriots.
Big piece is his landing spot though too, right?
Yeah.
So and that like last year, and I'm not a guy who studies a lot of rookies, right? I'm a redraft guy, not a dynasty guy. So I look at them more after they've landed already, not how great they are and how fast they are and what I think their talent level is. And it's kind of like Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas Jr. just landing in a spot that worked out well. And this isn't as bad of a case of they don't have anybody else, but he's probably the best guy.
Oh yeah,
right now, by far. So and with Bryce looking good last year, which I was very happy to see. I know he's small.
Yeah.
That's probably his biggest downside. But
he's on the crappy Carolina Panthers, but
they're
getting better.
He looked really good last year, right? Like they improved that offensive line last year. So it just seems like a good landing spot for him too, right? To produce. So I like that.
Best 4'11" quarterback in NFL history.
I'm looking at the wide receivers going around, and I'm going up the list a couple of wide receivers, and we got DK Metcalf, Zay Flowers, Chris Godwin, Jamison Williams, then T. McMillan, then there's Jerry Jeudy, Jordan Addison, and Chris Olave. So I mean, those are the guys he's going around. So he really does kind of stick out. That's a good call, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, Dennis, so you want to talk about who you want to talk about for veteran rookie situation?
Yeah, this is a great example of value and how value changes as the draft season goes along. So dynasty season, man, I could not get enough Bashul Tootin on my team. I was rooting for Tootin.
I love him. I absolutely love him long term, but
could not get enough of him. Okay, I was picking him early second round in rookie drafts. Just if he was there and I had an early second round pick, he was on my roster. He's one of my heavily drafted players. And I was pretty confident because he's got a pretty good opportunity index this year. Opportunity index at 54. Remember, I said 60 is what I really look for, but 54 is good.
Dennis, can you just go over real quick how you come up with the opportunity index?
So the opportunity index is all based on what's left on the roster going into this season. And I look at just last year, fresh data. I don't try to do any forecasting, nothing. I say, okay, based on last year, who are the live bodies that are competing for that position? And if I look at their number and I subtract it from 100, and that's how I get the opportunity index. This is brand new, folks. This is beta testing at its best, but I've used this theory for the last 5 years. This is how I stumbled across guys like Kyron Williams. Okay. Cam Akers wasn't it. Did I know Kyron Williams was? No, but he was cheap and he was likely to be the live body if Cam Akers didn't work out.
Yeah, I
And
had
then
a
I
lot
get,
of him for that reason as
oh my
well.
God,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was an easy pick, but I'm like shocked that more people weren't on this guy. And last year was all Chase Brown. Chase Brown was the guy I'm like, man, why are we taking why are we taking Zach Moss this early? This is a career journeyman who's a good running back, but teams want great. Chase Brown was hurt his whole rookie year. He got hurt in training camp, never got a chance. When he did play, even though he was still banged up, he looked okay his rookie year. Very small sample size. But it wasn't that I loved Chase Brown. It was that Zach Moss didn't rate versus 100. Okay. So somebody was going to get this shot. That's how I felt about Tootin. But a funny thing has happened on the way to our redraft ADP. Tootin is now being taken ahead of Travis Etienne. Well, Travis Etienne was a magical 310 and over guy 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And dropped because he was used too much last season. I don't think that they're going to make the same mistake twice. So when Travis Etienne got a little less use the year before, he had a MVP index of 105, guys. That's top 12 material. He did it already in his career. Tootin's never done this. Now, Etienne was 46 on the MVP index, which is crappy last year. But to draft a rookie ahead of a guy who's back class, and this is a horse racing term again, growing up at the horse race track as a horse racing degenerate, broken down horse player, as they used to call us, you use terms like back class in fantasy football. Travis Etienne's got back class. If Travis Etienne was being drafted in the top 50 picks, I don't want anything to do with him. But Travis Etienne, I just saw him go with the pick 106 in redraft in FPPC. He's got no business being that late. And he's being drafted after Rootin' Tootin'. And he's being drafted too close, so I can't get both of them. So just like you said, there are some situations where I don't want to have them both. Okay. I can't get them both in this case. So I'm going to take the cheaper one. I'm going to take Travis Etienne, who's got the back class. That's kind of a strategy. And again, do I expect Travis Etienne to bounce back to 2 years ago and to be a top 12 guy? I don't know. But I know somebody on that offense is probably going to be capable if Trevor Lawrence stays healthy, if Hunter is a pretty decent, he only has to be a good second wide receiver, guys. That's a low bar to reach. And he makes that team better than they were last year. Yeah, I know they don't have Evan Ingram, but Brenton Strange isn't bad at tight end. So now you've got an offense that should produce. And it's either going to be Etienne or Tootin. Maybe not Bigsby. Probably not Bigsby.
Probably not Bigsby.
Could be, but maybe not. But there's a situation too where I don't want two of the three unless it's Etienne and Bigsby, because Tootin is just too expensive right now relative to what I expect of him. So I've gone full circle. I was like, I'm taking Tootin in Dynasty, but now Tootin has gotten too expensive. And now I like Etienne better.
All right.
Everything.
And I'll be fine.
Mike, you have any you got any thoughts on Etienne?
Like you guys were talking about with the other things with Tootin, the people you can get around him. I mean, there's Emeka Egbuka is right around there.
Yep.
Tank Bigsby is also right around there. Not that I want him either. But then Tua, there's some other guys I might take over him. Darnell Mooney's right there. He's somebody I actually like in that range.
Yeah, Mooney's money, man. That's
so that's somebody I like there. Jaden Blue is right around there as well with Dallas. So there's a couple of guys I'm probably more likely to take than him at that spot.
Jaden Reed is there too. Like,
Yeah.
it's either Jaden Reed or Golden's going to be a WR15-ish kind of guy. I'll take a chance on either one because, again,
Really? Or
yeah,
are they gonna
because
do the 78, 75, 73, 72 thing
Love
again?
spreads the
so
ball around.
the
Well,
year
it's the
the year
same thing that I
before,
feel about Lamar Jackson's receivers. They spread the ball around too well for
Yeah.
me to want to
yeah,
invest that.
I don't buy that
And then
because
the team likes to run the ball. LaFleur's
the
a run
year
guy. Baltimore
yeah,
runs too. They get the king. So
if you look at Reed when he was healthy last year, okay, you look at his best 10 games, his MVP was 110 in those 10 games. Nobody else in that wide receiver room was over 50 in their
But
best 10
I,
games.
I like him because they use him multiple ways, right? Like he also runs the ball. If you just were going just on catching, I don't want any of those wide
Well,
receivers.
he was
I'd take
here.
Reed.
Here's the thing: he was an 80 in MVP as a rookie. Okay, that's not great, but that's wide receiver two territory. Okay, that's like second half of wide receiver two,
And
and you're getting him with the
yeah,
110th pick.
yes. He's
That's
he's like a ninth round draft pick or something. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
and
the value there.
I'll take either Matthew Golden or Reed there because one of the guys has the upside potential if he can dominate. Reed, when he was healthy, though, I keep getting back to that. When Reed was healthy, he was a top 12 wide receiver. I will take that upside at that late in the draft, but I'll also take Golden because I'll take either guy and I'll bet on either one because if they don't work out, they're going to be a wide receiver three. If en- enough weeks that they'll be a flex starter for me. And I'm not drafting them to be my one or two at wide receiver. So I'm okay with that, of taking that upside pick with those guys. I wouldn't even mind having an all upside wide receiver group this year of having guys like Rashi Rice, Waddle, a Golden or a Reed, and maybe combine those with an Adams earlier. Now all of a sudden I've got, four guys that all have the upside any given week to do something decent, and they're probably not getting shut out. Even when Jaden Reed was lousy last year, he was lousy for like 7 points a game. So he wasn't shutting you out. So even in his bad weeks, he wasn't killing you.
No, the other wide receivers on that team were though. If you
Oh
invested
God,
in any of
they
them,
were
they
awful,
were
and that's why I look at it. And everybody's like, "Oh, Wicks, you got Wicks, and you got this guy, and you got Tubes," and
The
I'm like,
problem is you had too many of the other
they're
guys.
all
It's too,
WR3 guys. They're
yeah.
all WR3 guys,
hmm
and so either Reed or Golden will be the guy. I just don't know which one it'll be.
All right. Well, Dennis, Mike, appreciate you guys coming on. I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick closing. We've been going for 2 hours.
Yeah. Much
Appreciate
longer than I
everybody.
thought.
Well, we got Dennis. What you expect? I mean,
I get paid by the minute. I was told by Joe I get paid by the minute.
hey,
So
we got a lot accomplished. We talked about a ton of a lot of draft strategy stuff that doesn't get talked about enough. We shared some secrets. So I appreciate all the listeners who are still with us, who stayed with us the whole 2 hours.
Yeah.
Appreciate everybody who's going to listen to this afterwards once they find out it was an awesome episode. So next week on the Aces Up podcast, I got Frank Amaranti and Kev. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I think it's Surgeon or Masarayan. His handle is at Rotosurgeon. If
Yeah.
you guys know who he is.
We know.
two dynamite guests.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're buddies too, so that should be a good show.
Well, that's what I'm doing. I'm putting together guys who are going to be great together, and
Oh, they will be.
people that are entertaining as well, and guys that I like, that guys I've been following. So, and then tomorrow night on the Thursday check down, we got Mike Woolert, an IDP expert. Me and Rick are going to be interviewing him. I'm going to learn about IDP because I need to prep for my first IDP draft. I joined the FF7s, Iggy's charity league. I've never done IDP before. I'm going to be asking kindergarten questions while him and Rick, while Mike and Rick do circles around. I'm gonna be learning, so I'm looking forward to that one. Mike, Dennis, you guys want to tell the audience where they can find you, what you're working on, real quick? Do a little plug on your work.
You can find my writing musings at Fantrax, and if you ever want to listen to me speak, Optimus Fantasy is where I'm on a few podcasts.
Dennis?
You can hear the professor and I every week at the science of fantasyfootball.com, where we break down the data, and also follow me, DMike Media, on Twitter, where I'll be glad to be telling people how worthless year-end total points are in fantasy football, being predictive of the future. So great being on again. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Always a good time, Joe.
Speaking of the professor, you and the professor will be on Aces Up at some point this draft season. Mike, you're going to be on as well. I think I'm going to reach out to Nick Scripp and try to get you and him on. I'm hoping.
Oh, that'd be
yeah.
great. Nick,
Great.
Oh, dude, I love Nick. Nick is one of the best there is in the business, man.
Yes, he is.
So I'm going to go ahead and close and get out of here, close this out. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Hit the like button for us. It's a great first show. Dennis, Mike, appreciate you guys. Love you guys. And we are out of here.